The Japan Grand Self-Defense Force is reshaping to adapt to the changing balances in the region. One of the symbolic names of this process is the Type 16 Manoeuvre Combat Vehicle, shortly MCV. Japan is adapting to the world trend of wheeled tank destroyers, fire support vehicles. However, this island country has different geographical conditions and security concerns than the rest of the world. For this reason, the Type 16 brings many questions in mind. As the weapon detective, we're investigating the Type 16 and the questions it raises. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel before we start, and give us a thumbs up if you like our video. To be notified of our new video, please click the bell button. The Type 16 MCV is one of the most prominent indicators of the changing tactical thought of the Japan Grand Self-Defense Force. Of course, the transformation is imperative to keep up with the times. Yet, this new vehicle brings some serious questions to minds. So, analyzing the Type 16 would be useful not only to understand the current military situation in the Asia-Pacific region, but also to do an important mental exercise. To better understand the Type 16, let's briefly take a look at the history of tanks in Japan. Before the Second World War, the Imperial Japanese Army was considering the tanks as an infantry support vehicle, not an independent weapon system. Japanese tanks had low armor protection and relatively small caliber guns. Because the Type 89 Ego medium tanks and the Type 95 Hago light tanks had no significant opponents, they did their duties successfully during the Second Sino-Japanese War. After the defeat in the 1939 battles of Khalkhin Gol, Japan realized that their tank designs and doctrine were obsolete. Japan would either develop new tanks that could compete with the USSR or shift their expansion plans towards Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, where there were weaker armored units. They chose the second path and prioritized the production of warships and aircraft. In the beginning of the Pacific War, the performance of the existing tanks was sufficient. Yet, the US M4 Sherman tanks changed the balance. So, after 1943, Japan began to work on new tanks such as the Type 3 Chinu and Type 4 Chito. But the material shortages and other production priorities prevented to produce a meaningful amount of these tanks. Japan deployed all of them in the home islands against a possible Allied invasion, so the Type 3 Chinu and Type 4 Chito never saw combat. After the end of the Second World War, Japan had to accept dismantling the Imperial Japanese Army. However, because of the rising Cold War, the USA allowed establishing the Japan Grand Self-Defense Force in 1954. As the name implies, this was a self-defense force. In other words, Japan couldn't send troops abroad. In the beginning, Japan acquired World War II vintage surplus tanks from the USA. In 1955, Tokyo started an indigenous tank development program. 6 years later, the Type 61, which was the fruit of this program, entered service. Later, Japan has continued its tank development works with the Type 74, Type 90, and the Type 10. Throughout this process, the next generation tanks gradually replaced the old generation. However, the Type 16 has broken this tradition. The main factor behind the Type 16 is more economical than modern battlefield requirements. Japan developed the Type 90 as the replacement of the Type 74, but it was a much more expensive tank than its predecessor. So, Japan could only produce less than 350 Type 90s. Yet, there were nearly 900 Type 74s. The Type 10, which was developed to replace the Type 90, is even more expensive. Because of the cost problem, the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force cannot have a similar amount of Type 10 as the Type 74. So, instead of tanks in infantry fire support missions, Japan took the option of using a more economical system under consideration in the early 2000s. In 2003, the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force began to study a wheeled armored vehicle with a 105mm gun. Japan also evaluated other wheeled tank destroyers fire support vehicles in the market at that time. However, since none of these systems meet the criteria of size, weight, and compatibility with existing ammunition determined by the Japan Grand Self-Defense Force, Tokyo decided to develop an indigenous vehicle. 4 years later, full-scale development works began. The prototype of the new vehicle unveiled on October 9, 2013. It entered the service in 2016 with the name Type 16 MCV. The four-person crew of the Type 16 consists of the commander, driver, gunner, and loader. It is 8.45 meters long, 2.98 meters wide, and 2.87 meters high. The combat weight of the vehicle is 26 tons. 570 horsepower turbocharged diesel engine provides a maximum road speed of 100 kilometers per hour. The range of the Type 16 is 400 kilometers. The vehicle can negotiate 0.6 meter vertical steps, 2 meter trenches, and can fort to a depth of 1.2 meters. It has a 105 millimeter rifled main gun, as well as one 12.7 millimeter and one 7.62 millimeter machine guns. Unit and operating cost of Type 16 is considerably lower than the Type 10. Because the trucks could damage the roads, transporting a tracked vehicle from one region to another requires a tank carrier vehicle. The tanks have higher fuel consumption than the wheeled vehicles. Besides, the high vibration caused by the tracks increases the risk of malfunction in the vehicle's mechanical parts in the long run. The maintenance requirement of the Type 16 is so much easier than a tank. This factor gives the vehicle a high combat readiness rate. Of course, the tracked vehicles have better off-road capability, but the possible combat areas on the Japan Islands are generally urbanized. The 8x8 wheeled vehicles also have high off-road performance. Japan is one of the early users of the hydropneumatic suspension system. This system provides the extra off-road capability. Many recent wheeled and tracked vehicles use this type of suspension. Yet, the Type 16 suspension is composed of hydraulic cylinders and double wishbones. It is unclear why Japan didn't prefer the hydropneumatic suspensions for the new vehicle. Thanks to its weight and size, the Type 16 has an easy tactical deployment advantage. The C-2 cargo aircraft or a commercial ferry can carry it. A wheeled tank destroyer and fired support vehicle has lower ballistic protection than a main battle tank. Yet, they are not an element of an armored punch. They set up ambushes and use hit-and-run tactics. So, light armor protection is enough for them. Even so, the Type 16 offers good protection for its crew. The front of the hull and turret are resistant against 20 to 30 mm armor-piercing ammunition. The sides can withstand 14.5 mm rounds. The ballistic tests show that the Type 16 is also resistant against anti-tank weapons such as the Carl Gustav M2. The protection level can be increased with the use of modular armor plates. These modular plates are easy to replace if damaged. There are laser warning receivers on the left and right of the turret front, but they have a detection range of only 180 degrees. The Type 16 has no special design against improvised explosive devices and mines, but the protection level against such threats can be increased with additional armor packages if demanded. To save money and weight, the Japan Grand Self-Defense Force did not prefer an autoloader for the Type 16. Thanks to the commander's panoramic periscope, the vehicle has a hunter-killer engagement capability. The Type 16 can fire accurately while on the move. Indigenously designed 105 mm rifled gun has a unique muzzle brake and compensator consisting of rows of 9 holes bored into the barrel in a spiral formation. So, what do these features tell us? The Type 16 is the child of the same tactical thought as the Italian Centauro tank destroyer. During the First Cold War, the Italian army concentrated its armored units in the north of the country against a possible attack from the Warsaw Pact. The enemy could only come from the south by amphibious landing or airborne operation. This meant the enemy wouldn't be able to land a massive armored unit on Italian soil in the early stages of the invasion. Also, in those years, the Soviet naval infantries used the PT-76 light tanks and the T-55 main battle tanks, while the Soviet airborne divisions used the BMD armored vehicles. With its 105 mm gun, the Centauro could easily deal with these vehicles. In case of a surprise attack, the Italian army would quickly dispatch its wheeled tank destroyers to the required area. The aim was to gain time by countering and stopping the enemy's first attack. During this time, the army would send the tanks to the area for a larger scale engagement. Today, the Japan Grand Self-Defense Force is planning to use the same doctrine as the Italians. In the case of a possible Chinese or Russian attack, the Type 16s will counter and stop an amphibious or airborne assault. Using the gain time, Japan can redeploy its tanks to the combat area. On paper, everything looks good. But Japan has different geographical conditions than Italy. The Mediterranean was far from the mainland of the USSR, so the presence of the Soviet naval forces in the region was limited. Yet, especially China can fully concentrate its air and naval forces near the Japanese coasts. So the real defenders of Japan will be the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force and Japan Air Self-Defense Force. For Japan, losing air and naval superiority means losing the war as it was seen in the World War II. As a matter of fact, neither China nor Russia can perform an amphibious or airborne operation successfully without achieving air or naval superiority. In a scenario where China manages to control the air and sea, it would not be possible for Japan to redeploy its Type 16s from one island to another by using its C-2s. Then, would the Type 16 be really useless in a possible fight? Actually, this is not the case. In a possible war with China, the front will be very scattered. On the other hand, both sides have to concentrate their forces on specific areas. In peripheral areas, a vehicle like the Type 16 can provide some degree of tactical flexibility. And please don't forget that a possible Chinese supremacy would be short-lived. The USA would quickly change the balance by dispatching its mighty navy to the region. In the meantime, by using the Type 16, Japan could keep some strategically important islands, or at least prevent China from gaining full control. Of course, these are all doomsday scenarios. No one even wants to imagine such a war. It would not only destroy the current world order, but also the use of nuclear weapons would be inevitable. Some of our viewers may mention that Italy successfully uses its Centauros in peacekeeping operations abroad. Can Japan similarly use its Type 16s? Actually, this is not a meaningful question for a country that does not send combat troops abroad. Our analysis is that even though it is a good vehicle, the Type 16 has a psychological value rather than tactical. While Japan has reduced the number of tanks, it is still trying to prove both to the Japanese public and the world that it keeps its ground combat power at the same level thanks to this vehicle. However, as we mentioned before, the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force and Japan Air Self-Defense Force are the real defenders of this country, as it should be for an island state. Thanks for watching our video, and please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up if you liked our video. To be notified of our new videos, please click the bell button.